Afternoon.
Yes, you can use that. You can use this to go on forwards.
Oh, okay.
Forwards and backwards.
Okay. Good afternoon, colleagues. Thank you so much for coming this afternoon after lunch. And in this session, you are not going to listen to me the whole time. We are going to be doing a lot of hands work. So it will be a workshop format, but we welcome you and thank you so much for joining us this morning, this afternoon. I am a tag leader, the Technical Education Group tag leader for Theme 10, which focuses on the futures of higher education. And you've heard that there are a lot of themes that we have been working on. But this one in particular focuses on the futures of higher education. And we are looking at the 2050 horizon. So we are not looking at 2030. 2030 is around the corner. We have missed the bus. It's gone and gone and gone. And now we are looking at 2050. And I hope 2050, we are not missing the train this time. We are going to make sure that we jump into that train and move to 2050 horizon. We have been engaged in this project for over a year now, and part of and we looked at different ways and different people. And ISALC has done a lot of studies with higher education experts, students from different places, and students as well. And this morning, we had a session with students who were talking about the futures of higher education. And they had very interesting ideas about what the future should look like. And it's very surprising. It was surprising for me that they have depth. They don't think about the future the way we think about the future as adults. We always think about the future in terms of they are looking for a job. They are not. They are looking for something bigger than the job. They talk about values. They talk about humanity. They talk about equity. They talk about inclusiveness. All these things, they talk about when they look at quality of education, is the one that is inclusive, that is equitable, that is humane-based, and the values of ethics and all those things. So I think there's something that we are not doing right in higher education if our students, and these students are students who are in high school, they're not even those that are in higher education. So those that are in high school, whom we are preparing higher education for, who will be in the colleges or universities in the next 2 or 3 years, have a different idea of what higher education should look like. So in this process, this session, really it's about a hands-on touch and the way we are going to contribute to the discussions on the futures of higher education and how to recommend actions towards the visioning process. So the whole background paper that was written in Theme 10 was to contribute towards the discussion. It's a methodology. It's a methodology session. So it offers methods and tools that could be used or adapted for designing and developing images or scenarios for the futures of higher education in different contexts. So what I want you to do in this session is just to undo everything that you think. Just erase everything that you think of higher education and step in with me in this higher education in the 2050 community. So I'll tell you how to do it. So basically, the project itself, we looked at, and the project produced quite a few reports on pathways to 2050 and beyond, future of higher education, envisions collective and holistic responses to global challenges. One was the experts' view, and there was Pathways 2050, and there's a lot that has been produced by ISALC in regard to this. And these were produced by policymakers, higher education experts, stakeholders, young people, and there were a lot of also videos. There are 2 chairs here, sorry. There are 2 chairs 2 chairs here. Sorry? There's another chair right in front. And you can sit here as well. There's a stage that you can come and sit here. And there's also a stage that you can sit here. Sorry, we didn't. So, the question that we were trying to respond to was, why do we have to think about the future of higher education? Why is it that it's important? And I know that usually we look at the challenges that we are facing at this point, and we don't look at the future of higher education. And if we don't look at it, other people will make decisions for us. Other people will shape the future that we are not aspiring for. The economists have already done that. They have shaped the future that we want. People, they want skills, they want certain things, and every day we run after whatever that they are looking for, and we produce the students that they want. And then COVID comes, those students are no longer the right kind of students that they are looking for, then we run after that group again. So we will be running around if we do not come up with clear visions of what we want higher education to look like. So we think about it because we want to look at potential changes that are likely to make fundamental differences in higher education over the next 30 years. 30 plus years. Some of us will be around, some of us won't. Some of us, even when we are around, we may not be able to see or hear. Some of us not. So this is the future that we are trying to build now. And we need to propose the possible, probable, and preferable futures, which are different. And we focus on the word futures because with futures, we are looking at different possibility. Not the monolithic way of looking at education, the education that comes from a certain perspective, but we are looking at different types of futures. And the future of higher education offers us tools to envision images of the future. This methodology offers us tools to envision images of the future. And it forces us to live with a different awareness of time, the past, the present, and the future. Remember, the past is what created where we are right now. And where we are right now will create what the future would look like and other aspects. So the present is providing certain opportunities that we can exploit and strengthen in order for us to go to the future. Or the other things in the present we may need to abandon. Other things we may need to strengthen to move forward. Others we may need to abandon. Others are coming with the baggages of the past that we may need to get rid of, but there are things that worked in higher education. It has a 400-year history, and something is definitely working. So those that are working, we'll continue with them. Those that are not working, we'll drop them. And we will introduce other things. COVID, for an example, introduced opportunities that I come from an open distance learning environment where we always talked about digitalization and teaching in an online space and teaching students who are not with us. And we were not taken seriously until COVID hit. Gosh, we were a hit. Everybody wanted to know how we do these things. Irrespective of what every time we were like, the quality is not good because the student is not in front of you, because of this, because of that. But when COVID hit, I said, thank you, COVID. Where have you been all these years? Then people came rushing, wanting to know, how do you do this? So those are some of the opportunities that came through during this process. And we need to begin to think about those opportunities moving forward. Because if we don't, other people will. And they'll do such a bad job for us that we won't be an education system that works. Now, this paper is really about methodology. We engage in futures research to bring the purpose of higher education back into focus in order to address the social, cultural, individual, and community value of higher education. We go back to the value of higher education. Higher education has a 400-year history, and there are a lot of things that had impacted on higher education. Some of them was the book, when the book came in, the printing press. There were different types of technologies. There were the industrialization impacted on higher education. But after the industrialization, it looks like things just moved very, very slowly after that. And we're still doing what it has been done in the past. And we continue with assessment practices that have been there in the past, that were preparing people for industrialization. Now, we need to start thinking about it. So the futures research is about systematic way of thinking about the future. It's about questioning our assumptions, what we think this is all about. It's about creating alternatives from what we know as what higher education should look like. It's also about images of the futures we aspire for. And as human beings, we are involved in thinking about the future all the time. We take insurance policies, don't we? So that should anything happen to us, then there's this thing happening. We plan around the future. So it's important also that we don't leave that there, but we continue. So in this paper, we used common good as a visionary lens. And the reason that we used common good is because we wanted to bring the goodness of people in the limelight again, to bring people working together and sharing responsibilities. And one of the criticisms of higher education these days is that it is very individualistic. It removes people from working together. So we're trying to bring that. And that's a visionary lens that we're using. We want also to bring together diverse knowledges from different contexts. In the developing context where I come from, knowledge is often from the north, from the Western countries. So we are, that type of knowledge is the one that has been pushed, and the knowledge that other indigenous knowledge systems are not really part of the knowledge systems. It also needs to be responsive to the community in which higher education is situated. In some instances, higher education is not actually responding to the needs of this community. We are not even looking, countries have their national development plans, they have this, they have that, but I doubt even when we plan or strategize, we use those things. So the common good was used to provide us with a vision where every member of society, provide a vision where every member of society is empowered to develop their full capacities and able to interact with others. Now, I use this vision of the common good from where I come from my context in South Africa. We have this concept of Ubuntu, where I am what I am because of others. So it's a communal way of doing things. It's a communal way of thinking about what higher education should be, as opposed to what it is right now. And the important thing is that we also use the social justice framework. We believe that there's a social justice mandate that education has to play. So the social justice framework addresses issues of redistribution, issues of equality, equity, and reality. There's a lot that we talk about in terms of equality, where all of us start and run the race together. And then there is a way, and equity says no, but you need to bring up those people who are not at the same level as you are. So it's equitable access, not only, but then when you focus on equality, the reality is that those that always had advantages continue to have advantages over others. Now, here's the group work that I want us to be engaged in. I want us to sort of remove or erase everything about now and the past, and let's try and think about 2050, where the goals of common good and social justice are realized. To think about higher education in that space. But we start by thinking about what would the community look like? What is the role of higher education in creating that society? What did we have to let go and give up to get there? So these are the three questions that I would like us in this group. My goodness, how are we going to do this? To divide up the groups. Because some are already in little corners.
I think we trust people to self-organize. You need 4 to 5 people.
Yeah.
Find the 4 to 5 people nearest to you.
Yeah.
And just to give you a sense, we're going to give you some time to work on this. Then we're going to get some reflections, and then we're going to do a bit more thinking about methodologies for futures work in education. So that's the structure of what this session looks like, just in case you're wondering,
Yeah.
what have I let myself in for? So,
And then, and then there are places outside. If you want to go outside or you want to stand in the hall or anywhere, just take your 5 people and be at the corner somewhere or the corner here and just have a discussion. It's not a lecture, it's a workshop. So people have to gather together and talk. And I'm giving you 25 minutes. I'm giving you 25 minutes. So and plus 5 minutes to organize yourself, so 30 minutes. You can organize yourself internally. You can go outside. There are sofas outside. You can move around. I know it's a difficult thing to do. And I'm facilitating your workshop. Organize yourself, and then I will come and call you when you are left with only 5 minutes to come back. Okay? Start. We are not talking about the community now. We are talking the 2050, right? Are we getting it right? It's 2050, 2050, 2050. I told you to erase today. Today doesn't exist. And I'll be standing here in 2050. Think of me in 2050.
We're doing it. We're doing it. We're doing it.
3 more minutes to wind up. 3 more minutes to wind up. What do you want? 5? Are you negotiating with 5? 5. 5 minutes. Huh? 3. You're ready. You see, this is the group that made me think that we should. We should.
We're not competitive. We're not winning.
Yeah, there's no rules. We're all together. It's all part of your contribution.
Contributing to the common good.
This is what we learned.
What we learned.
Yes, so yes, I'm just giving more gold stars.
But it's telling, huh? Immediately you're going to the first.
So I'm going to ask the question, if you want to preempt it, what's the easiest and hardest about that process of imagining a different world? So maybe have a think about that process. What was it that you found easy, difficult about answering some of those questions? Yeah?
I find it hard to make the world higher education.
It's hard to find out what we need to know.
Wow. That's something I already had in my head, so we don't need to.
Yeah, but how higher education is they are all
This was more than stuff because it's more about personal attitudes.
and I think like usually higher education is not understood as a social change maker, you know. It's more as you learn and then people decide to pursue certain objectives, not as a system. It's not seen as
And in Europe, it's very instrumental.
yeah.
Oh, we need this solution. That universities can give us that. But it's not that.
Hard. I sort of know what I envision as a future, but it's hard to describe it. Down to like, I don't know if the correct words or the correct framework.
The main goal, like I know what I would like to experience, but I think the steps to getting there are a bit harder, like you meant, like the actual practical, because of course in theory we always like this, but then actually getting there and the work is on it. Like we know where we would like society to go, but I think it's depending on so many factors and so many like individuals coming to what you said, like coming together and so on, putting in the work. I think that's how the thing
Colleagues, you know the good thing about conferences is that you can take this conversation further and further and further. So today we just started this conversation, and I'm going to ask my colleague, Kerry Facer, to go through with you with the reflections and just to talk about this process of forcing you to be creative. And we should have given you little pieces of papers to draw so that you can come up with those images. Or sing, or come up with a poem, or something like that about, or rap for 2050. Can you imagine how those lyrics will sound like? Kerry Facer, over to you. She'll introduce herself.
Yeah. Thanks, Mapini. So I'm Kerry Facer, and I'm a Professor of Educational and Social Futures at the Universities of Bristol and Gothenburg, and I've been working with the UNESCO team on their Futures of Education Commission. And I am curious and fascinated by how we think about futures and what that sort of process is. So Mapini's asked you all to do something that we can often find quite difficult. Those of us in leadership positions in organizations, we're good at seeing the obstacles, the problems, the reasons why things aren't possible. And sometimes we can find it quite difficult to imagine the world that we might want. And as Mapini said, there's different ways of thinking about futures, many, many different ways. Actually, there's a big debate about whether we should think about the future at all, but that's a separate conversation. So what I'd just like to do, though, is invite you to reflect not on the content of your futures, but what it was like to participate in that process. What happened to you inside when somebody said, imagine a world where everything you want has been achieved? So think about your groups. What did you find difficult? Or, yeah, let's start with difficult. What did you find tricky about that process of imagination? What did you see happening in that process, in your group or in yourselves? I'm going to pick on this group in a minute, because you know. So, anybody else, what did you think? I'm coming back to you. Get ready to say something. What did anybody find easy or difficult? Or could you just do this? No problem. Yeah, stand up, please. Yes, thank you. And oh, do we have a microphone? Yes, that would have been, fabulous.
Hello.
Yay,
okay.
great. Lovely,
Hello,
thank you.
everyone.
Hi.
My name is Salma Ahmed. I'm from Norway. I work for UNESCO ESALC with Emma right there. Anyways, so our group, so in my head, I was thinking, you know, we're thinking about something that is a reality that is not really a reality, right? Mm-hmm. So if you ask me, like, okay, so how do your ideal future look like? I would start thinking about, okay, so I want a world where everyone is like living with equity, right? Mm. But then the idea of, okay, something is just for me, the idea of justice for all is not the same for everyone. Yeah. So it's like the idea of finding something that is, oh my God, I just blanked out. This is low-key scary.
Don't worry, it's all good. It's all good. We can come back if you want.
No. No. My point is just the idea of like looking for something that is supposed to be a reality, but then you're questioning yourself, could this even be a reality?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
I mean, that's fascinating, isn't it? So every time you say something, you've got a little voice in the back of your head going, oh, these are all the reasons why that might not be possible. There's that fantastic phrase, you know, it's easier to imagine the end of the world than the end of capitalism, for example. I didn't say that. Anyway, no. But you know, we think about the obstacles that gets in the way, but then also something I think I heard you say, it's like you imagine the future, but also you're doing it with other people. So immediately we're in a world of politics, we're in a world of negotiation, aren't we? So my idea, how does my idea relate to somebody else's idea? Thank you. I think there's a gentleman here who was going to say something. Right, thoughts, reflections on this process, not on the content, just how do we think about futures?
So, I am Ramanand. Our first challenge was because we belong to different group.
Yeah.
So how can we imagine a society where we all four exist? Yeah. Mm. So I belong to different society. She belongs to different community. First. So then we were thinking about just some fundamental, objective of that community. Mm-hmm. So what will be the kind of fundamental virtue we want in that community?
Yeah.
So he suggested the less consumerism, and she was suggesting some kind of acknowledging common good.
Yeah.
So those are the values which all communities,
Yeah, lovely.
Yeah.
That's great.
Want in the future.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that gets really difficult is when we've got so many different people involved, you can end up sort of having to agree on such a top level that you start saying, well, does it mean anything anymore? Because it's like, it'd be great if it was all nice in future. Yeah. So it's hard, isn't it? Because you've got these different histories. So one of the things that we do in future studies is sometimes we try to make it concrete. So we say, imagine an object that exists in this future. that you all agree on. So you organize your thinking around an object or a ritual or a practice, and that can help make it concrete and give you all something to talk about together, because that's the challenge, isn't it? Negotiating this. Fabulous, thank you. I think there was a gentleman, up here on the stage. Can you, did you raise your hand or were you just scratching your head? Oh, hang on. We've got the microphone here, so if you go first and then we'll come back to you. Is that okay? Yeah, now that you've got, is that all right? So go.
No, I was just reflecting on, it's very interesting when there's some people you don't really know very well yet, and we're all very diverse, and you don't understand their backgrounds, how important it is to really listen, to try and listen to what people are saying and get beyond the words and understand the context of what they're thinking a bit, because we have such different backgrounds. So that's like a precursor to the discussion almost, to get past that.
That's so fantastic. One of the reasons I really enjoy doing futures work is because it gives us a common space to have a conversation with each other about. I'm bringing you the microphone, sir. I can see you. It's coming your way. Thank you so much for that, the importance of listening.
I have not a special idea, but I think that society in the future, we will share with the robots, and we will maybe in higher education institutions teach the robots how to live.
I'm so delighted.
It will be a very different society, I think, in that time.
Yeah.
And the major thing for me is that the issue of the future will be the resources. And we will think how to develop the water and some other energy, etc., because it will be the higher priority. And maybe we will not have that professions now we have. Maybe robots can do that, but so, except of the because I am from elder society, from the Soviet society. I'm from Armenia and taught in Moscow State, in Yerevan, etc. And that time communists told that will be communism in the future.
We were in socialism.
Yes.
And then as a student we ask what the communism, they imagine that we will not work, we will work by enjoying only. If we enjoy work, we will do that work. And we will, we're always asking what we will do if we will not work. There was not that answer.
This is gorgeous. So I love it. Thank you very much. So one of the things that I love coming...
And to add to what you said about capitalism, that is what brought actually this discussion about the capitalism. You never know. I mean, maybe capitalism is the solution, but in a transformed way, because socialism proved not to take us to communism.
So that's a different conversation, but we're going to hold on to that. So thank you. You hold the microphone for a second. So I just want to reflect on something interesting that comes out from what you just said, which is how do histories shape our ideas of futures? So thinking about how history shapes our idea of futures, remembering that we are living in past futures, so we're living in some fantasies that we've inherited, but also you were saying I'm an elder, I remember a different time, and then that's the critical thing for me in any attempt to think about futures. Who's in the room? Okay, who is here? Who are we talking with? Because each of us bring different histories. Each of us bring different experiences, different stories. So if the only people that are doing futures work are the same age, the same gender, the same country, it's incredibly dangerous. So this question of how we listen, to pick up your point, to each other, and we listen to difference as we're trying to imagine futures, absolutely central. Thank you for bringing that up. I'm going to hand over to Mapini. You need the microphone in the group, don't you, still?
Yeah, no. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, colleagues. I just want to find out how many of you, with show of hands in a group, have done number 1? All of you? Number 2? Did you get to number 3? It's getting better and better. It's getting better and better. Yeah, number 3. It's very few. Very few groups have gone to number 3. Now that we have imagined that future of 2050, I want to find out what is it that we need to get rid of, that we had gotten rid of in order for us to find ourselves in there. Someone talked about the robots. So what did we do with people? Did we get rid of people? and substituted everybody with robots? So what is it that we had to let go? Yes, ma'am.
I'm Melanie from the HDC. We had to get rid of the individualistic perspective, exactly what you mentioned with Ubuntu. So if I'm only happy, if I'm happy, we will get nowhere. I have to come to the point where I'm willing to let go of what I really want for the benefit of somebody else, for that little guy who does not have a crate to look over the garden. And we have to let go of this me first mentality that we seem to have fostered by maybe capitalism or not, but we didn't know how. We did just only know we have to let go of that, of part of that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, sir. That's very interesting.
We have to let it go, institutionalism. The institutional knowledge, the overemphasis on institutional knowledge, only institution can serve the knowledge, or you can get the higher education. That feeling, we should let it go.
We need to let go of that feeling.
Yeah, we need to make the kind of higher education more inclusive, and we have to include the kind of the indigenous knowledge, diverse knowledge, the part of institution.
So you are talking about diversity of knowledges.
Yeah.
We have to be inclusive in terms of the knowledges that we find ourselves in.
Institutionalism and instructionalism and consumerism, we should let it go.
That's interesting. Yes.
Yeah. Daniela, I'm also with UNESCO Institute for Higher Education Latin America and the Caribbean. Yes, we talked about that. We agreed with the other group, but we also talked about getting rid of a system that produces winners and losers. So changing the mindset of how we currently do science, how we do education that benefits some universities or some systems or some countries. There's no winners or losers. There is common knowledge, there is common understanding, and we wanted to take that.
Okay. So that's what led us to the community that we are young. Okay. Romila?
Yes, I don't have a mic.
Oh, the mic is coming.
Thank you. I think we should get rid of the teacher-centered method of teaching. We should go towards learner-centered and let the learners do more crowdsourcing of their ideas and inform the knowledge that has to be there. And I believe that we should also get rid of assessing contents of knowledge, because in 2050, all the knowledge will be lying in our mobile phone. We should more move towards making learners think of what knowledge they should use and in what conditions.
Great stuff. So even the assessment practices have to change in the future, isn't it? Yes, sir. Or there's someone.
Yes, I want to say just something which we used to say. Or I used to hear that if you want to go fast, you have to go alone. But if you want to go far, we want to go with people.
Yeah.
Which means that we need to go together instead of thinking that we must go faster, because we are in a society which is very fast. Everything is fast now, electronics, everything. So what's one of the reasons of self-centralism? So we need to go together, forgetting that we can go alone so fast. That's the point.
Thank you very much. There was someone who has did you have your hand up?
Yes, but it was said already.
Oh, okay. Any comment? Thank you.
Merci, thank you. We thought that first we would like the universities still to be, so we should not drop the universities.
Okay.
We should keep them. But we should drop what they have, which is centralized and undemocratic, and too much bureaucratic. We are in establishments which are extremely centralized, and we think it's time to make a real democratic institution of the university.
Oh. Oh, yeah, okay.
May I add, we would like to see a university as a distributed network of power, not with hierarchy to have a chief, but to have a peer-to-peer, including all stakeholders, including students, people from community, to discuss, to cooperate, to collaborate, and so on. Distributed, peer-to-peer.
How do we reach that?
Oh.
How do we reach that? How do we find ourselves in that space?
Hard work.
Oh.
Hard work.
Hard work. Yes, sir. The bottom. How do we get to this vision that we are thinking of?
Yeah, I'm Thomas Jørgensen from the European University Association. I just want to make some polemic here. I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that. We have that. We have that. We have in Europe, we have universities that have 25 faculties. Each of them are their own legal entity, and they can't coordinate anything, and it doesn't work. I mean, we tried it. It doesn't work.
We didn't say that.
No, but I'm being polemic. So how can we have an institution that has strong and inclusive governance, but it's not the complete every researcher, every faculty goes for themselves, and the faculty of business can't deal with the faculty of tourism, and in the Senate they throw things at each other. Just. That's a very good question. But if we have some kind of units that are distributed, how is it going to work? How are we going to work as institutions?
Okay, this is getting interesting now. We are getting into our spaces.
Thank you.
And I don't want us to talk about what is it that we are doing. I want us to talk about that world that we want.
So you see, we have to have distributed.
And what I think we also need is dialogue. So you mentioned all these faculties, but they don't discuss with each other. We can't be teaching economics like there's no link with politics or with sociology or with environmental issues. We really need to foster a transdisciplinary and systemic approach, because otherwise we'll continue to leave all these issues behind.
Okay. So that's what we are going to be doing in 2050. I'm looking at the world in 2050. and it's upon you to make sure that it's multi and interdisciplinary.
I mean, we really need to do that before 2050. Otherwise, we're not going to make it to 2050.
Okay, there was a hand somewhere. Oh, there, this side. Thank you. We are going to wind up.
Well, we talked about getting, it's not like getting rid, but questioning this unit of the classroom as a way to move knowledge forward. And how do we open this box, this classroom? Like, how do we make education more open source? And how do we establish diverse communities of practice, and that are more like linked and accessible, and in a way like this idea of governance has diverse expressions and not only like one point of view. And
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. I don't know what we usually define higher education as having 3 roles: teaching and learning, research, and community engagement. And I want us to unbundle that. Is that what we are looking at when we are looking at 2050? Are we continuing with those roles the way they are? Or you are saying no? What do you have in mind? What do you have in mind?
My name is Abdel Baghi from the Sudan. Firstly, I think the key question is number 3.
Yeah.
Yeah. What you'd like to let go and give up. But I think all of us think of knowledge, I think of technology, so on, and I think behind that is important, what do we let go of values and or certain behaviors and so on, so that we can achieve what we think of today. Another thing is important, we have to take into account that there are forces against that. Yeah. How can we actually overcome these forces?
The forces.
Yeah.
Give it to the gentleman behind you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I think it's not a team conclusion, it's my thinking. I think we have to let go our mindset about what higher education, not university, but higher education is right now. Because the people who will study in 30 years now is not born yet. So I think we need to focus. There's so many ways that young people, even children, are learning today. And they are not learning in a typical classroom that we knew when we were young. I mean the elder ones, because many people is young here. So I think we have to let go our mindset about higher education, about education, indeed. Because people is learning in so many ways and in so many environments.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Just to add up on this very important idea that was here, rather than giving up on 3 of the missions of higher education, maybe they would be enhanced or increased or expanded, we should give up on the idea that higher education and the monopoly of higher education institutions in offering higher learning.
Yes, yes.
Because higher learning is broader. It will be broader, it will be wider, it will be beyond higher education institutions. So we have to think who are the other actors that will be in this higher education area, providing the higher learning, covering the higher learning. So higher education institutions, monopoly should be given up.
Yeah, but I think that monopoly will go when these other things mushroom in a bigger numbers.
They are already mushrooming. We are just not recognizing them.
They will be recognized. The minute industry recognizes them, they will be recognized. Can you pass it over to? Yeah. What
I think that continuing with that comment just quickly, and then I go to my original comment, is that I don't think we should keep up on higher education as like higher learning, but I think when we talk about higher education, we are talking about universities, but higher education is much more than universities. So yes, giving up on the monopoly of universities to own higher learning, but higher education is much more bigger than that. So we were actually talking about lifelong learning and how that diversification of knowledge and bringing other kinds of knowledge into higher education, which we think will be like a different concept or a different understanding of it, maybe, but not giving up on it.
Okay.
And then my original comment was that when we were talking about the challenges of thinking on these questions, the second question was kind of hard because we knew sort of what we wanted in the future, but it was kind of hard for some of the colleagues to really give a role to higher education for that future. So I think thinking about the missions, I wouldn't give up those missions, but I would put more emphasis on the community engagement and seeing higher education as an actor for social change could be more important in 2050.
Colleagues, thank you so much for, oh, there's someone with a hand up. Then that's my last.
I kind of had my hand up in my head.
Okay, in your head. So you are the last, and then we are going to move on.
Well,
this is very interesting.
Thank you. It must have been a telepathic link. Martin Dugiamas from Moodle, but I see the future is going to be a very chaotic environment that we need to recognise. AIs are going to be generating most of the content. There's so much distraction, so much going on, and I feel like leaving all, let's say, adult lifelong education to everybody to govern themselves will mean we'll have more divergence, more separation. And I feel like we need to work out an adult core curriculum, actually. Like, how does democracy even work if we can't agree on even the basics? I feel like there's got to be some, in fact, more pushing into society of higher education, and I feel like there is a role for higher education now to do, to raise citizens, not just workers.
Yeah. I like your last point, that higher education, oh, there's another person. I thought it's the last. No.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think the last point was actually quite interesting, because when I was looking at this series of questions, I thought, in order to construct the future, I think we actually need to respond to 3 questions. What do we want to let go? So what is it that we don't like now and that we don't want to carry into the future? But there's also the question of what do we want to carry into the future and what is valuable. And I think that was perhaps your point, not venturing into chaos altogether, but working on what works well already. And what is it that we want to construct? So I think these are the 3 questions really that should guide our thinking, because but I just want to say also that I have appreciated very much this exercise of mind opening and envisaging the future a little bit from free.
Thank you.
Okay. There's a board downstairs around the tea place where you can have your comments. We would love those comments. So that these comments that you are saying to us now, just put them downstairs so that we have those comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Mpini.
Over to you, Kerry.
So, one thing I notice when I hear everybody speaking is I wonder how many of you are saying things that you didn't think before you came into the room. Or how many of you are bringing to the room the things that you always say in these settings, the arguments you always make. And so one of the things that it's worth doing is thinking about precisely this question of listening and using the future as a space that can also surprise you. It might give you different questions from the ones that you usually work with. It might require you to ask questions about things you don't want to think about. And that's what futures processes really are designed to do, is sometimes it needs to make you feel a bit uncomfortable. What happens if you usually think about robots and AI, and the future actually is a world of mass ecological disaster, degradation, and nobody's actually connected to the internet? What if you are the sort of person that is thinking very hard about climate change and disruption? How are you thinking about the robot AI developments? Okay, so the critical thing is to develop a reflexivity. No, but there are patterns in our thoughts. We have habitual ways of thinking about the future. So if the guys will put up the slides right now, the next set. Anybody got some? There's a surprised look on the back. The future was unexpected. Sorry. Can you see one called, I can't remember, WHEC Theme 10 pre-conference slide? You got it, guys? Yeah. In the Google Drive.
It's got 30 years.
Sorry? It's got 30 years, it's fine. Okay, so while you have a look for that, I will just start. So what I want to do is just help us think a little bit about this process of thinking with futures. So thinking about how we use ideas of the future in education. Now, the thing is, in education, it's almost always about the future, isn't it? I mean, let's face it, people send kids to school with this assumption that it's going to be handy in the future. So our job is really enmeshed in futures and futures thinking. The problem is we're not always reflexive about it. So quite often we can just take it for granted. We'll say the future, we really mean tomorrow, okay? What distance, what time scale are we thinking about? We're thinking about 2030, 2050, 2200, 2500. Which future are we thinking with? okay? Quite often it's just tokenistic, and it's usually technological. So one of the things that's common in our society is that we use technology to scaffold, to support our thinking about the future. If we take technology away, will we still be able to think about the future? So what I want to do is just introduce us to some different approaches to thinking about futures in education. I can see it on here. Okay. You guys have still not found it.
Okay.
Is that right? Excellent. Keith has emailed it to you. Maybe you'll find it. So that's all good. It doesn't matter. So one of the things that I was doing for UNESCO was developing a piece of work called Ethical Futures in Higher Education. Because I think when we're thinking about futures...
No, it's not that one.
No.
No, it's not that one. It's not that
Mapini, would you be able to... Keith, could you just liaise with them? Yeah. So it doesn't matter. It's fine. It's just stuff. I've got it on here. That's the most important thing for me. So the background report that we did for the UNESCO Futures of Higher Education Commission...
Yeah, there it is.
There we go. Hurrah. Yeah. We've got pictures of a sunset. There we go. So here we go. The reason I wanted this is because, you've got to have a jetpack if you're talking about futures. It's a bit disappointing if you don't do that. So I have my jetpack feature. So as I said, the way in which we think about futures in education can often be tacit, tokenistic, taken for granted, and we assume that technology is the key driver, whereas actually there are many, many different drivers. But we need to reflect on these ideas of the future. So what I'd like us to do is just think about, sorry, hello, where's it gone? Interesting. 5 different, you have to deal with the unknown, you see? That's how it works. Is that we can thinking about the future in education as having kind of 5 elements to it, all right? And it's useful to untease these, to pick these apart. So one element of this is thinking about education in the future. That's what we've been doing today. How do we imagine the role of education in the future? But we are also concerned with the question of how do we prepare young people for the future? That's a common question that we're concerned with. They are not the same thing. We tangle them up too much. A third question, which we don't discuss particularly sufficiently, is how do we support students to think about futures? And if we're thinking about the impact of climate change, if we think about eco-anxiety, this is a really growing critical question. A fourth question, which comes quite often from non-Western traditions of thought, is this question, how do we liberate education from the future? Should we see education as being about futures at all? That is a longer conversation, read the paper, but we're not going to go in that today. And finally, this question, how might we think about education as healing the future? And I'm going to conclude with that. So today we've been thinking about education in the future, and I just wanted to share with you some techniques and processes that people use for thinking about that. So commonly we've got things like Delphi processes, where you just ask a load of experts what they think the future is going to be. Okay, that's one way of doing it. I think there are problems with that in terms of who's missing. We look at emergent issues, so scanning the horizon, what's coming up, can be one of the things that we use when we're thinking about futures. We can do modeling, so we can model and forecast what we think is going to happen. So look at the IPCC, that's their approach. We can develop scenarios, so a set of possibilities. Now, the thing to bear in mind with scenarios is, these were developed in the 1950s out of game theory, out of Cold War theory. They are deeply connected with the fossil fuel industry. Shell were some of the people that developed this. So they're useful techniques, but they're really rubbish if you want to also really think about values. So there's a limit to what you can do with them. And then there's an approach which is sort of what we were doing today, which is backcasting, which is imagine a future and then think, well, how did we get there? So all of these are really useful, fairly standard tools for thinking about futures. I really enjoy the field of critical future studies. Okay, this to me is particularly helpful. So I just want to introduce a couple of these approaches. So the first of them is causal layered analysis. So this is developed by Sahai and Yotula. from Malaysia and Australia. And what this basically says is all changes have, oh yeah, that's gone interesting. All changes have 4 levels. So you've got the headline level, the thing that you can see visibly. You've got the structural level. So what are the structural and institutional shifts that had to happen? You've got the worldview level, what are our beliefs and ideas, and then you've got the mythic level, which is what are the stories we're telling about our world that sit underneath this. So if we apply this to higher education and climate change, which I've done, and we think about this in relation to universities, you can think about writing yourselves a headline. So imagine a headline when the thing that you desired wanted to happen. So we might say, the UNESCO Universities Network at COP30, okay, we've got 4 years, demonstrates how it has partnered with marginalized communities around the world to prevent climate change. What might sit underneath that? A whole set of new funding structures and organizational practices. Underneath that might be a set of changed curriculum and research practices. And underneath that might be a new idea of the person at the heart of education. So what a causal-led analysis does when we're thinking about futures is invite us to think at these multiple levels. A different approach, and this goes to the point that you just raised earlier, is what we call a 3 horizons approach. Bill Sharp uses this a lot. So this invites us to ask, this is very interesting in terms of what's becoming visible. No? Okay. So it invites us to ask, what are the problems with business as usual? So your first horizon would say, what's wrong with what's going on at the moment? A second one is what we did earlier, our third horizon, which says, what are the changes we would like to see in the world? The fourth question is, what is emerging and disruptive? And then the critical issue is, how can we harness what's emerging to pull it more towards the change we'd like to see than towards the problems with business as usual? So for me, when we're thinking about whether it's AI or robotics or emerging climate disaster or shifts in politics, the critical question we have to ask is, do we know the change we'd like to see? Do we know the problems with where we are at the present? How do we shift what's going on into that trajectory, the change we'd like to see in the world? There is a beautiful diagram here. So yeah, envisage it as you will. All right, so those are a couple of more critical futures approaches that I think are really worth exploring. But I want to close with this last one.
Okay.
Last thing, which is an approach called Reparative Futures, which has been put forward by my colleague Arathi Sriprakash, and there is a fantastic background paper for the UNESCO Futures of Education Commission. And this question basically says you cannot imagine futures unless you attend to the harms and problems in the past. So this, I would just like to point to 2 books that I think do this beautifully. The first is Vanessa Machado de Oliveira's book, Hospicing Modernity, which I really encourage everybody to read. And the second is Sriprakash and colleagues' book, Learning Whiteness. Both of these are focused on saying, how do we repair the harms that we are living with as a basis for creating different futures? So the critical questions when we're thinking about futures in education: reflect on my assumptions. Which are the ideas that I always think shape the future? Whose knowledges are being used to shape them? Who's going to deal with the consequences of the futures that I'm imagining? All right? They have consequences. What might the unintended consequences be? And how do these ideas of the future acknowledge and heal past injustices and harms? And there are some references there for those who are interested. Thank you very much. Hand over to Mapini.
Thank you very much, Kerry. This was a very, very interesting session that we had, if I have to say so. I liked the way you imagined the future. I liked the way you came up with all these different things. Now, we cannot end here, can we? At least we must take something out of this workshop and go to your communities, go to your universities, go to your places, and start reimagining the future. So the recommendation here, I highly recommend that. Start with this exercise. You can start it in your own department and build it up. And we have given you some tools And thanks, Kerry, for the information that you can get moving forward with this, so that we do not leave it here. We do not leave it here. Now that we know that we can do something, we can think systematically about the future so that we can shape what higher education becomes. And so that we can face those kids who will be adults in 2050 and say to them, this is what I had imagined that your higher education should look like. So let's not fail the kids that are coming through now. Let's not fail the adults of 2050. Let's do the right thing by thinking about what the future should look like. There are a lot of methodologies that we can use. Please, let's start thinking about the future and forget about who's going to be in your way as you're thinking about the future. Just think. Just imagine. There will be people on your way, but start it and go on and bulldoze and bulldoze. You'll get there. You'll get there. There will be 2 or 3 people who are going to support you. Thank you very much, kindly. Thank you, colleagues.